Hi there, Chris the Geek figure fan here. Today I want to do something just a little bit different to my normal videos. Those of you that watch my channel will know that I've been really enjoying and getting into this adventure series line from Hasbro. And we've had Wave 2 fully announced and some pipeline reveals for Wave 3 come out. What I want to do today is just look at those in a bit more detail and have a bit of a fun speculate over what we might see more of in waves 3 to 5. So I'm actually struggling to find where I'd read it. So people please put in the comments if you know for sure. I was under the impression that we were getting 5 waves to this series. And I also wasn't really aware at the time how many additional retail exclusive figures we would be getting, and have been many of them. I've currently got 10 figures so far, just as part of wave 1 really. Five figures from the main line and 5 figures that are retail exclusive. I'm kind of amazed at how they really are putting everything behind this line, and I love it. I love it. So let's take a look at each individual film and see what potential figures there is within these movies that haven't yet been tapped. I'm gonna steer mostly clear of the new movie Dial of Destiny, partly because I don't know every character that's going to be in there. I don't know how, what potential they've got to be a figure, I suppose is the best way of putting it. Plus, we've had a couple of announcements already. Wave 2, we know, has got Indiana Jones and Helena Shaw, and we know that in the pipeline reveals, we also have a Voller and a Ronaldo figure for Mads Mikkelsen and Antonio Banderas, respectively. So I think we'll largely steer clear of that. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go through every movie and see what untapped potential there is, have a bit of a speculation over what figures might be coming in the future, and just a bit of a geek out really over what figures I'd really love to see myself. I absolutely have no insider knowledge here. My God, I wish I did have insider knowledge, but this is just my opinion. Please pop in the comments if there's any figures that I've missed that you think would work. I would love to see that too. And maybe we'll have a little go at imagining what the next 2 build and artifacts might look like as well. So, firstly, I just want to say, have we finished with Raiders of the Lost Ark yet? Because even in Wave 2, we are still getting Raiders-related retail exclusives. In fact, I think every retail exclusive announced so far for Wave 2 is a Raiders of the Lost Ark exclusive. So we've got the sort of disheveled Indiana Jones from the bazaar in Cairo, the fight scene. We've got a repackaged Wave 1 Indy with the idol and the stand that the idol is on, sort of a movable stand as well that goes up and down when the idol is removed off it. And we have a double pack of Denham Elliott's Brody and Paul Freeman's Renee Belloc as well. So I don't know if we're finished with Raiders. I'm just going to give you a couple. So I want to preface this by saying Hasbro will always want to reuse molds wherever possible. So you've got to bear that in mind. And that is partly why we're seeing so many Indiana Jones figures. Whether you love it or hate it, I have an issue with Wave 2 being 5 figures and 3 of them being Indiana Jones, when there are so many other figures that they could do, and they could be releasing some of these as retail exclusive figures. But that's just me. So remember, Hasbro are going to want to reuse molds wherever possible. It is cheaper for Hasbro to do that than to create a completely new mold for a completely new figure. So I do think there is untapped potential in Raiders, specifically with Belloc. I think a pre-title Belloc would be good. The Belloc with the khaki explorer attire on, and at the same time you could get a Sapito figure as well. I think that would be interesting. Get Alfred Molina's likeness on a figure for the Indiana Jones range. That would be great. And I tell you what, I've really got to try and say the word figure a lot less. I've watched some of my other videos and the word has lost all meaning to me. And I know that in this slightly longer form video, I'm probably going to say it 100 more times. So my apologies. By the end of this video, none of us will understand the meaning of the word figure. But anyway, I do think there is more potential in Raiders, and perhaps we'll look at that again a little bit later. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to move along from Raiders of the Lost Ark to Temple of Doom. Now, I love Temple of Doom. I think it is my 3rd favourite Indiana Jones film. I think it's an 8 out of 10. However, I will concede that there are far less compelling major characters in this movie. And when you take time to look at it, I think it is difficult to find a variety of characters to include in multiple waves. But that being said, I think there is potential for multiple versions of the same character very easily. So let's start with Willie Scott. There is absolutely no argument that we are going to see a Willie Scott figure at some point in this range. It looks likely, considering the pipeline reveals, it's probably going to be waves 4 or 5. But there are definitely two, in my mind, there are two looks that stick out. So I think for Willie, you would go for the pre-title sequence, musical, anything goes number, the red and gold sparkling dress. I think that look fantastic on an action figure. And then I also think that you could have the Willie Scott, you could have the look of her in her white gown when she arrives at Pankot Palace and she's trying to put herself out there as a potential suitor for the Sultan. I think that's the second look for Willie. So they're the two Willie Scott figures that I think may come. I think one definitely will. And if I had to take a guess, I would want the pre-title sequence Anything Goes, because then it will go with my Club Obi-Wan Indy, and I think that would look fantastic together. So I think also from Temple, I'll shoot through this quickly, I think you've got to have a Moraram. You've got to have a villain from Temple of Doom, and unfortunately, there isn't a lot to choose from that I think would make a compelling figure. But Moraram absolutely would, especially with the headdress. I think, and I might be wrong, but from photos I've seen, I think the brainwashed Indy from Wave 2 will have the skull that they drink the blood from, which is a bit of a shame, really, because I think that would have been a great accessory to have with Moraram. So I might be wrong, but I thought I'd seen in photographs that the Indy figure in Wave 2 came with that sort of blood glass skull. So we'll see. And then from a point of view of villains, I don't really know where you go. We've got a couple of iconic henchman type characters, the thuggy soldiers, especially the large soldiers that we see whipping the children. I think you could do a thuggy grunt soldier. I don't think it'd be a pretty exciting figure, but you could. And perhaps because you're doing a smaller figure like Short Round in Wave 2, maybe another shorter figure like the Sultan would sort of become a nice mirror to Short Round. We know that they have that altercation towards the end of the movie, so perhaps that's the way they go. But honestly, I mean, I could pick more costumes for Indy in this movie, but we've already got 3 if we include the retail exclusive Club Obi-Wan Indy. I can't really think of that many more without going back to the well of a smarter dressed Indy with his jacket on. So I think you leave it there with Indiana Jones figures from Temple of Doom. But if they're deciding that they want to make an equal number of figures for each range, then they're going to have to do a lot of repeating, a lot of using of the same mold. So we'll have to see. I'm going to move on now chronologically to The Last Crusade, because I think there is so much potential for different figures. I want to say it's my favourite of the trilogy, but it really depends on what mood you get me in, whether it's this or it's Raiders of the Lost Ark. So let's have a quick look. I'm going to quickly run down what figures I think could be in this range. There are tons. We know from the pipeline reveals that we're getting Henry Jones Sr., Sean Connery in this range, which is amazing. And we're also getting an Elsa Schneider as well. And we're also getting a Grail Knight, which is super exciting. I really like the sound of that. And we're also getting another Indiana Jones. The photo they've used in the pipeline reveal shows that it's the Indiana Jones that's wearing a black tie as well. So I'm glad that they've pictured that, because at least that's something slightly different to what we've seen before. But it'll be the Indy I'm imagining that we see going to rescue his father from the castle and then escaping on the motorbike. That is the type of Indy that we're seeing here. So other than those in the pipeline reveals, I definitely think for reusing a mold, there is the potential for multiple Schneiders, because you've got Schneider's look when they meet in Venice. Venice. And she's wearing her smart suit that gradually gets destroyed as they find the second Grail marker. And then we've got the version of her where she is outed as a Nazi sympathizer, and she's working with the Nazis to get the Grail, and she's got that more sort of pencil skirt blouse and grey Nazi-esque hat that she's wearing, which is the picture that they use in the pipeline reveal. So I imagine that must be the version of Elsa that we will see moving forward, at least at least in this instance, but there's definitely the possibility that we see more than one version of her. I don't know if we see another version of Walter Donovan, although we are only seeing him so far as a retail exclusive, so I suppose there's the potential that we see him in a slightly different suit, perhaps at the point where he's enlisted Indiana Jones into looking at the rubbing of the first Grail marker. So I don't know. We'll have to see. And while we're rattling through this list, I just want to take a second to please ask people to subscribe to my channel. It would make a massive difference. If even 10% subscribed would make a huge difference to me. So yeah, now back to the list. So I'm going to go through some others now, but Vogel, the other lead Nazi character in this movie, I think will absolutely get a Vogel figure. And I would hope we would, because when I say that when I think of a villain in an Indiana Jones film, I think of Tote, I also kind of think of Vogel as well. And when I was young, I think I used to think they were one and the same. But yeah, I think of
Vogel as a very iconic Indiana Jones sort of Nazi villain, so I would absolutely want him in there. I'd no idea if my video is going to get flagged for saying the word Nazi so much in it. Probably, who knows? Anyway, I think we need to see at least one figure from the young Indiana Jones title sequence. 100% want a young Indiana Jones in his scout uniform with a whip and the Cross of Coronado. That would be so awesome. That needs to happen. Make sure that we get River Phoenix's likeness on a figure. That would be incredible. And then maybe from the same thing we could get the guy that's getting the Cross of Coronado. Not so much the guy who looks like Indiana Jones, because I think he's in the film he's just called Fedora. I don't think we need him because that would get confusing, and on a 6-inch figure he'd probably just look identical. But I'm thinking more of the guy who's called Panama Hat in the credits of the movie, the man with the cane and the white suit. He'd be a striking figure to look at, I think. So Panama Hat would be my other character from the earlier part of The Last Crusade. And then looking at another mould reuse, although perhaps with some extra padding in the middle area, we would come to Salah. I think we have to see a Salah figure here. For me, he is the quintessential Salah look, even though it's only in this movie and he's only in sort of the last hour of it. I think of the fez and the white suit and the cummerbund when I think of Salah. So that is what I want to see. I absolutely want to see a Last Crusade Salah. And then by the same token, they've already got a mold of Brody. So I would absolutely expect to see perhaps a disheveled Brody that's been riding around in the tank in his beige suit that's muddied up, tie off, that kind of look for Brody. I like the Brody in the double pack with Belloc, but Brody wasn't really much of a character in Raiders of the Lost Ark. He was a real supporting character in The Last Crusade, and I think he deserves a Last Crusade figure. I also think there is room for another alternative Indy on this. Hasbro will be happy that I'm letting them reuse the same mold here. I think we need a tickets please Indy. So I want to see an Indiana Jones in a white waistcoat that is far too short for him, 5 o'clock shadow, dirty, hopefully with a position thumb, so that I can have him pointing out of a window and saying no ticket, because we absolutely need to see a tickets please Indy. I don't really know. I can't really think of any other Indiana Jones looks that I would want for this movie. But there is definitely, so we've said before, there's definitely multiple Elsa Schneiders that you could have in this movie. What does the build and artifact look like here? So personally, I think if you do an oversized Grail, I think that's going to look weird in comparison to the other build and artifacts that we've had so far. So I know that the artifacts aren't really to scale to each other, but I think they look fairly standard next to each other. My suggestion for a build an artifact is to build to the same sort of scale and have a section of the Grail table with a variety of different Grails on it. I just can't think of anything else you do for the build an artifact. And I'm more than happy for the true Grail to not come on the build an artifact, but it to be an accessory with one of the mainline figures, whether that's with Indiana Jones or whether that's with, it won't be with Walter Donovan because we already have a Walter Donovan with a full Grail, maybe with Elsa Schneider, but I'm happy for the Grail to be included in another figure, and then there be a space on this build an artifact that Grail can be placed on it. Either that or part of the table and maybe the well that held the water that the Grail was filled from. Something like that. I just can't really think of anything else that you could use. I mean, the well itself could come as an accessory with the Grail Knight. I don't know, but I think that's all you can really do as a build an artifact there, is have a part of the table with multiple grails on it and a space for the true grail to be put on. Maybe a space for Walter Donovan's false grail to go on as well. But like I've said to you before, you can't, as a Hasbro employee, assume that we have bought all of the retail exclusive figures at the same time in order to complete the waves. I think the accessories that fit into the build and artifact have to come from the main wave figures. I think it's unacceptable for them not to, and I'm sure they will. But that's it, I think, for Last Crusade. I think that they're the figures that we're looking at, and there'll probably be more, but they're the figures that I want to see. So moving on to Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. I think a little bit like Temple, there are less compelling characters in this movie, but I do think there are more figures than there are in Temple that could be created as figures. Maybe they have more distinct looks. Not that they're better characters, because most of them definitely aren't. But for Kingdom, I think this is fairly easy. We'll go through it, and to be honest, I think the first five characters that I name are going to be the five that we would see in a main wave anyway. So for Kingdom, we definitely go for the older Indy. Not as old as we see in the Dial of Destiny figure from Wave 2, but we have our Indy in his 60s. We obviously go for a Mac figure as well. So the Mac look that we see at the beginning of the movie, where he's dressed similarly to Indy. We have an older Marion. Again, we can reuse the same mold with a few tweaks, but we get Marion Ravenwood back as another figure, and we also then get Mutt Williams as well as a figure. The whole Indiana Jones family as a set of figures, and then I think you go for Spalco as your fifth figure. So Kate Blanchett's character in the sort of iconic blue, is it blue, gunmetal grey kind of suit that she wears, pants suit. A little bit actually how Walter Donovan's dressed in his retail exclusive figure, with the tall black boots and the grey suit, and she can have her sword as an accessory. And then it goes a little bit off the rails here, because I don't know where you go from those five figures. You could do an Oxley perhaps, so John Hurt's character, but then I don't know how boring that character would be. You tell me. You could do one of the guardians of the temple that the crystal skulls are collected within. So the sort of Mayan, Incan type native character. I don't know how tasteful that figure would look. And then every other character I can think of only appears in the film for like 5 minutes. So do you do Jim Broadbent's, Brody Light? No, I don't know. And so the other figure that I was contemplating depends on what they consider the build an artifact to be. So I've put as another character I've written down here, interdimensional being. So then it depends on whether or not we build an interdimensional being as the build an artifact. And do I feel that having one of the interdimensional beings as they are, I'm going to call them aliens, it sounds stupid, they're aliens. One of the aliens fully formed, if you had that as a figure, I think that'll look weird against all of the others. I think it will look out of place, even though we know it's in the movie. Personally, what I think you do is you don't do an interdimensional being as a figure, and then as the build an artifact, you have a throne and you have a skeletal alien. You have a throne with an alien skeleton on it. Is that probably too many pieces? I don't know. And I think that's pretty much all you do for Kingdom. I mean, Hasbro aren't stupid. If you put out 25 Last Crusade figures and 7 Kingdom of the Crystal Skull figures, you're still more likely to sell all 25 Last Crusade figures, because it's the better movie. And there is, to be fair, there is stigma that comes with Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. I like it more than most, but people love to hate on this movie. So Hasbro aren't going to invest too much in this film, or at least they're not going to invest as much as they did in the others. So I think you keep it to the 5 mainline figures and the build an artifact, and there probably won't be any retail exclusives from this range unless they go for another version of Indy again. So maybe another Professor Indy look for the 60-year-old Indy. But I don't know. I think they'll probably leave it as it is. So I think that's it. I think that's where we sit, and that's what I want from the range moving forward. So to recap, I want lots of Willie Scott in Temple, I want Mora Arm, and then I don't know where you go. I think Last Crusade, I want a million figures, and I think the Build an Artifact should be a Grail table, and with Kingdom, I think they're just going to stick to the main range. And I think, again, the Build an Artifact writes itself. So, guys, what do you think? I want to know what you think. Thank you so much for sticking with me if you are still here, and for listening and watching me waffle on about this range that I am loving collecting at the moment. And hopefully you're watching it because you're loving collecting it as well. Stick in the comments any characters that you think I've missed. Any characters you'd love to see in figure form. Maybe you want that guy that eats chilled monkey brains in Temple of Doom. I don't know. Maybe he'd be an amazing figure. He'd have some great accessories, I reckon. So yeah, thanks ever so much for watching. I've been Chris, the Geek Figure Fan. Take care. Bye-bye.